Aletsch Glacier, the largest glacier in the Alps, hides vast moulins and an underground river that reshapes the mountains each summer. Do you know Aletsch traps air bubbles and stones that let scientists read climate and volcanic events older than recorded history? Aletsch Glacier stretches over 23 kilometers and crowns the Bernese Alps with the single largest continuous ice mass in the Alps, a rarity that rivals only a handful of places on Earth. Do you know that beneath its blue-white surface lies a hidden labyrinth of ice tunnels and subglacial lakes that researchers only recently mapped? This living river of ice flows from the high snowfields around the Aletschhorn and the Oberarhorn toward the Concordia Platz, where several tributary glaciers converge like arteries. From that great junction, the glacier slips down through steep ice falls and shining crevasses, shaping the rock beneath into U-shaped valleys and polished ridges. The surface is a patchwork of deep blue ice, dust-dark moraines, and seasonal snow, each layer carrying clues to centuries of climate, written in compacted snow and trapped air bubbles. Scientists can read past atmospheres in those bubbles, decoding temperature swings and volcanic events, turning the glacier into a natural time capsule. Each of those traces tells a story of adaptation and loss, prompting questions about how Alpine cultures will change as the ice continues to shrink. Yet the glacier still inspires urgency and wonder, driving conservation efforts and drawing people who want to witness its scale before it alters beyond recognition. From Aletsch, we can follow the story across Switzerland's mountains to lakes, villages, and glaciers downstream, each landscape reshaped by the glacier's past and present work. Protecting Aletsch is not only about preserving a scenic icon, it's about safeguarding water security, biodiversity, and the cultural fabric woven around the ice. The decisions made here will ripple across valleys and borders, shaping how future generations will know these mountains. Interlaken rests on a narrow strip of land between Lake Thun and Lake Brienz that their contrasting turquoises meet within sight of each other. Do you know that Interlaken's position was carved by the meltwaters of the Aare and ancient glaciers, leaving terraces, plunging gorges, and a route that would later guide legendary mountain railways? From the promenade, you can see boats tracing luminous trails on Brienz, while steamers glide on Thun. And that visual split hints at the tectonic choreography behind the Alps. The town's name literally means between lakes, but its real magnetism comes from how it links gentle water landscapes to soaring peaks, like the Jungfrau Massif. Walk or ride the funicular to harder Kuhl, and the panorama flips. Lakes below, the valley funnels pointing toward the snowy ridges where climbers and scientists study permanent ice fields. Paragliders launch from those ridges, dropping into the valley like colorful birds, their flight paths sketching a living map from Interlaken to Lauterbrunnen and beyond. Follow a river trail out of town, and within hours, you can stand beneath hanging glaciers or peer into a valley that funnels directly toward the immense north face of the Eiger. That proximity, lake, valley, glacier, and sheer rock, is the secret that made Interlaken not just a postcard, but a living corridor between very different alpine worlds. Travelers still arrive by the century-old yellow trains, stepping off into a landscape that feels curated by glaciers, yet stubbornly raw. By following the links from Interlaken to the high peaks and secret gorges, you begin to understand how Switzerland compresses countless natural wonders into a space you can cross in a single day. Is one of Europe's largest alpine lakes, and unusually supports Mediterranean flora along its shores, from Montrose palm trees to terraced vines in Lavaux. Do you know that Lake Geneva, or Lac Léman, suffers a mysterious seiche, an overnight standing wave that can shift water levels by nearly a meter and ripple through Geneva and Lausanne alike? Those same gentle currents cradle medieval Chillon Castle on a rock, like a storybook sentry guarding the lake's entrance. From Chillon, the shore rolls into the mosaic of vineyards in Lavaux, where stone terraces cling so steeply that centuries of farmers created a sunbathing amphitheater for grapes. The vines here are not just scenic. They produce wines tasting of lake breezes and sun, a terroir shaped by the lake's heat retention and reflection. Stay with the lake longer, and you'll see how every rip and ridge tells a chapter, leading you naturally from castle stones to vineyard paths and city plazas. By the time you leave the shore, the lake will have rewritten your map of Switzerland, showing that mountains and water can be one continuous, surprising landscape. And that very continuity is why Lake Geneva remains a secret teacher, part garden, part history book, part mirror, inviting you to read deeper. Lucerne sits where crystal-clear Lake Lucerne meets the rising limbs of the Swiss Alps, creating one of Europe's most dramatic lakeside panoramas. Walk across the Chapel Bridge, the timbered span, crowned with 17th century paintings that once narrated the city's history. The bridge's octagonal water tower watches over the Reuss River like a weathered sentinel. From the cobbled Old Town, painted facades and Baroque churches lead you toward the Lion Monument, a carved rock face mourning fallen Swiss guards. The quiet gravity of that stone lion is somehow both intimate and monumental, a human story set in limestone. But Lucerne's real secret unfurls when you step onto the lake itself, where steamers and sailboats thread narrow fjord-like arms carved by ancient glaciers. Sharing a meal by the quay feels like continuing a local ritual that has tied communities together for centuries. As you leave the lake to continue across Switzerland, the memory of its glassy arms and wooden bridges stays with you, a living thumbnail of how nature and culture entwined. Lucerne teaches a simple lesson. Travel here is not just about ticking a landmark, but about following the waterways that stitch landscapes into stories. Come morning, mist often rises from the lake and briefly severs valleys, revealing new vistas as it lifts. Every voyage on Lake Lucerne feels like finding a different Switzerland within the same scene, and that is what keeps visitors returning. The Matterhorn summit, standing at 4,478 meters, is composed of rock carried here on the African tectonic plate, a geological oddity found in only a handful of Alpine peaks. Do you know the Matterhorn's perfect pyramidal silhouette was shaped by 4 separate glaciers, and that its first ascent in 1865 ended in a tragic collapse that changed mountaineering forever? From the car-free village of Zermatt at its feet, the mountain looms like a sentry, its snowfields and rock faces shifting color with the angle of the sun. Climbers still follow the original Hornley Ridge route, but today, guided teams and modern gear make an ascent a different test of endurance than the Victorian era's deadly gamble. Walk a few kilometers up to the Gorner Grot, and the Matterhorn's reflection in the Gorner Glacier's meltwater seems almost unreal, linking mountain, ice, and sky in one frame. The rack railway that carries visitors there was opened in the 1890s and turned isolated high alpine panoramas into accessible vistas, changing how people experience the peak. Beneath the Matterhorn, the Theodule Glacier feeds slopes that become Europe's highest year-round ski terrain, connecting Zermatt to Breuil-Cervinia across the border. That cross-border playground reminds us this peak is more than a Swiss symbol. It's an international landmark where languages, cultures, and alpine traditions meet. In summer, alpine meadows around Zermatt flush with edelweiss and gentians, offering a soft counterpoint to the mountain's knife-edge ridges. In winter, the glow from mountain huts lights routes for climbers and skiers, a human heartbeat against a vast frozen backdrop. From high camp, the wind writes fresh patterns on snow, and the Matterhorn's shadow slices across neighboring peaks, proving how one singular summit can orchestrate an entire landscape. By the time you descend to the valley, Matterhorn's imprint is impossible to shake. A geological transplant, a tragic ascent, a village's identity, and a magnet for those chasing the rarest edges of nature. Scientists study its glaciers and rockfall patterns to understand climate shifts, while artists still chase its silhouette for postcards and gallery walls. Even now, the Matterhorn teaches how a single mountain can be at once a classroom, a cathedral, and a mirror, reflecting human ambition back at itself. Rhine Falls near Schaffhausen thunders across a 150-meter-wide curtain of water and ranks as Europe's most powerful waterfall by average discharge. Do you know Rhine Falls hides a tiny rocky island in its middle that you can actually reach by boat and climb for an up-close view? At just 23 meters high, the falls are not about vertical drama so much as raw volume and relentless motion. For centuries, that force shaped the banks. Monks, millers, and later engineers carved channels and mills into the rock, turning natural fury into livelihood. Perched above the northern bank, Schloss Laufen watches the river, its ramparts converted into viewing platforms that bring you within arm's reach of the spray. From those platforms, you can feel the wind pushed by millions of liters per minute and watch rainbows form in the mist like moving tapestries. In spring and early summer, snowmelt from the Alps sends peak flows racing over the lip, and the falls swell to their most thunderous state. In winter, the roar softens, but the scene becomes crystalline, with icy fringes and a hushed stillness that highlights the geology beneath. Boatmen have ferried curious visitors to the Central Rock since the 19th century, and stepping onto that island is to stand in the middle of a living, roaring map of the Rhine. From here, the river has led empires and merchants onward, downstream to Schaffhausen, to Lake Constance, and eventually toward the Netherlands. A short ride brings you to the riverside town of Stein am Rhein, where frescoed houses and medieval streets feel like a natural continuation of the Rhine's story. The same current that carved the falls carved trade routes, art, and industry, linking natural spectacle to human history. Swiss National Park holds one of the last large contiguous tracts of untouched high alpine habitat in Central Europe. Do you know the park, created in 1914, spans 174 square kilometers and enforces rules so strict that you can't camp, pick flowers, light fires, or bring dogs within its borders? From the larch-scented valleys of the Engadine, the trails climb into a wilderness where glaciers and limestone ridges sculpt a landscape mostly unchanged for centuries. Here, natural processes run their course. Avalanches, glaciering, and harsh winters shape ecosystems that scientists use as a living laboratory for understanding alpine ecology. Visitors who enter through Zermatt pass under old stone bridges and ascend past wartime fortifications that now stand silent beside roaming chamois. The park's strict protection has allowed species once driven to the margins to persist, from nimble ibex on rocky crags to marmots that whistle across the meadows. Rare predators like the golden eagle and elusive lynx are seen with increasing frequency, an indicator of ecological recovery few places in Europe can claim. Botanists catalog more than 80 alpine pine plants here, many adapted to extreme microclimates and seasonal snowbeds that melt weeks later than surrounding slopes. Every spring, snowlines retreat to reveal delicate orchids and saxifrages clinging to wind-sculpted ledges, a choreography of rebirth that happens with little human interruption. Trails thread between stone cairns and high pastures where shepherds once grazed and now act as quiet witnesses to the park's long conservation history. High above Zermatt Valley in Switzerland, the Klein Matterhorn hosts Europe's highest cable car station and an ice palace carved into eternal glacier. Do you know that the jagged silhouette of the Matterhorn inspired the iconic Toblerone chocolate, and that Zermatt has been car-free since the early 20th century, to protect its fragile air and silence. The village itself is a compact necklace of timber chalets, Alpine bakeries, and old stone chapels that seem arranged as an offering to the peak. From those quiet lanes, the Gorner Grat Cog Railway pulls you up through larch forests to a rounded ridge where 29 4,000-meter summits parade on the horizon. At Gorner Grat, the panorama folds into the vast white belly of the Gorner Glacier, its crevasses like frozen rivers pointing back toward the Matterhorn. Walk down along the Riffelsee, and on still mornings, the mountain doubles itself perfectly in the lake, a mirror connection that photographers chase at dawn. Riffelalp blends into the trails that thread to Schwarzsee, where a tiny chapel perches beneath the Matterhorn's massive southern face, and Weimers begin their final approaches. High above, the Klein Matterhorn cable car deposits visitors onto steel and snow, where an interior ice gallery has been hollowed through centuries of snowfall. From that glacier-top vantage, the town below becomes a model village, and the valleys spill away like layers on a map, each route hinting at the next exploration. Every switchback trail, funicular line, and cable car in Zermatt is a deliberate link, a choreography that lets hikers step from village warmth into the continent's high silence. In Zermatt Valley, those connections are not just transport, they are stories, connecting chocolate wrappers, mountain worship, engineering feats, and the stubborn endurance of Alpine life. To follow the valley is to move through time. From timber workers and goat tracks to telescopes on ridges that measure glacial retreat in millimeters. And when you stand at Riffelsee or on the Gorner Grat at dusk, the valley's sewn together places reveal why generations have returned to this steep, connected world. Nestled where the limit meets Lake Zurich, the city's old town folds into a tapestry of medieval alleys and river-swept promenades, framed by Switzerland's glacier-tipped skyline. Do you know that beneath the cobbles of Lindenhof lies the footprint of a Roman fort that once watched over these same waterways? Walk its narrow lanes, and you'll stumble upon church towers like Grossmünster, rising with twin spires, their stone faces telling stories of reformers and city power struggles. Across the river, Fraumünster holds windows painted by Marc Chagall, colors that turn stained glass into a map of keyed miracles. St. Peter's clock face watches the market square with the largest dial in Europe, a civic heartbeat carved in iron and paint. Guild houses line the streets with carved coats of arms and hidden courtyards where craftsmen once mixed dye and metal into the city's wealth. As night falls, the stones cool and the city remembers itself, inviting visitors to trace the lines between cathedral, market, and river in their own footsteps. Zurich's Old Town is not merely preserved, it is layered, a living palimpsest where each renovation preserved a secret, and every square holds a rumor of the past. And when you turn a corner expecting postcards, you may instead find a narrow bookshop, an ancient sundial, or a doorway that leads to a courtyard hosting generations of unknown stories. Zermatt shelters the Matterhorn in Switzerland, one of the only mountains that forms a near-perfect pyramid, visible from multiple valleys. Do you know the Matterhorn's Hornley Ridge hides year-round snowfields that local guides still treat like living maps? The village of Zermatt clings to tradition with no cars allowed, its streets threaded by electric taxis and horse carts. Walk away from the chalets and the Alpine air sharpens, revealing routes that have shaped mountaineering history for over a century. From the Gornergraut Railway, you can watch the Matterhorn change faces with every turn, a performance of light and geology. Riding higher, you pass glaciers that siphon meltwater into turquoise lakes, feeding valleys and ancient irrigation systems below. Climbers still test themselves on the Hornley Ridge, where weather, rock quality, and tradition decide who reaches the summit. But Zermatt also whispers quieter stories, alpine botanists cataloging endemic flowers in scree slopes and herders timing moves by stars. At Klein Matterhorn, cable cars float above crevasses, bringing skiers to glaciers that allow winter runs in summer's shadow. Each lift links villages and viewpoints, folding modern engineering into landscapes shaped long before humans arrived. Local guides pass down route knowledge like family heirlooms, mapping thin snow bridges and hidden bergschrunds that cameras cannot show. Their warnings keep the village safe, and their stories make the mountain human, stitched with triumphs and near misses. Beyond the iconic peak, the Gorner Glacier holds ancient air pockets and sediments that scientists read like a climate diary. Ice cores from here have rewritten parts of our understanding of Alpine weather cycles and human impact over centuries. By evening, Zermatt's stone houses glow, and the Matterhorn throws a copper face at sunset, a daily benediction. You leave with more than photographs. You carry an itch to trace a ridge, to listen to the mountain's stubborn secret language. From the mirror-smooth waters of Lake Lucerne that cradle mountain reflections like painted glass to the silent, gnarly glaciers of the Bernese Alps that still carve the valleys, this country hides small miracles at every turn. Do you know the rare phenomenon in the Valais, where thermal springs bubble beneath vineyards, warming the roots of vines that produce Alpine wines you won't find anywhere else? We followed narrow train tracks into fairy tale villages, climbed ridgelines that look like the spine of the earth, and dove into lakes whose colors change like an artist's palette. Each place we visited led to the next. The cheese sellers of Gruyere explain the pastures that feed rare mountain cattle, which in turn shaped centuries-old festivals in the Alpine hamlets. The engineering feats here are as much a cultural landscape as the peaks themselves, where cable cars and tunnels thread human ambition through rock and snow. And beneath the surface, microclimates and geological quirks create pockets where orchids bloom beside slate, and where lightning sometimes dances in a ring of stone. If you remember one thing from this journey, let it be how intimately connected nature and people are here. Every lake, glacier, and village contains a story written over millennia. These are not postcard views frozen in time. They are living systems that shaped language, food, and memory. And they ask us to listen before we leave. So go with curiosity. Taste the unexpected flavors, follow the lesser trails, and look for the small oddities that make this land singular. Because when you return, you'll carry fragments of its quiet strangeness, and that is the real reward of traveling through these Swiss landscapes.